After several failed attempts at keeping it 100% dust-free, I gave up and just did a quick field cleaning. It may not have passed the white glove test, but it would damn sure work if I needed it. After a nice 5-star meal, I decided to break out my ham radio and turned it on, seeing if there were any other hams in the area. I scanned the stations and didn't really come across anything of interest, except for a few rangers reporting their status. I decided I'd do something that you're really not supposed to do and started scanning the CAP channels. For those that don't know, the military operates on MARCAP channels, which have a very high frequency, higher than VHF. So, please forgive the reference. You can eavesdrop on them with the right radio modifications, and as long as you don't broadcast, you should be fine. I started scanning these channels and came across a bit of chatter. They didn't seem to have much to say either, except area status reports. After a bit, I started getting bored listening to them all report on 10ths of 100 and turned off my radio. As dusk was turning to darkness, I sat for a while, just letting myself go into a trance, staring at the fire, as I decided another drink was in order. I began to hear a bit of crackling coming from my bag. I grabbed my bag, assuming some critter or maybe a monster had decided to make itself a new home, and instead found my radio turned on slightly. I turned it up a bit and realized that the sounds I was hearing were short bursts of what sounded like gunfire over the radio. Intrigued, I turned up the volume and listened into whatever testing or war games were going on. As I listened to the action, I heard what can only be described as fingernails on a chalkboard, coupled with a blood-curdling scream and a bit of a dying rabbit mixed in. As I reached for the knob to turn the volume down, I heard a pop, and then silence. My radio had gone out or blown a capacitor, and I was now without any form of communication. I sat there in silence for a moment, wondering if coming out here wasn't the best idea. After thinking about it for a moment and a bit of self-reassurance that I was just picking up chatter from 100 miles away, I decided that I was just letting small, stupid things like the coyote carcass and the radio chatter get to me. For all I knew, it was just some war game being played, and new equipment being tested. I decided it was time to get some sleep, and I'd do a bit more exploring in the morning. I took one more swig and crawled into my tent for some rest. As I woke the next morning and crawled out of my tent, I felt like death. My back ached, and I was incredibly groggy and slow-moving. I restarted the fire, filled up my mess kit pot with water, and started boiling it while pulling out some instant coffee. I decided that today I was going to do a bit of riding around and exploring. I looked at my radio lying next to my tent and thought, guess I better be careful. After a morning coffee and an MRE of eggs and bacon, I grabbed my rifle and headed out to see if I could spot any signs of life or find any old abandoned equipment or buildings. I biked up a natural trail and came over a ridge to a large stretch of open valley. In the distance, I could see the beginning of a military base's fence. When I saw this, I felt an incredible sinking feeling in my chest. Whatever was going on last night may very well have been happening just a few miles off. I shook off the feeling and decided that I was just letting anxiety and my imagination get to me. I told myself again that it was only war games and that some noise was probably getting through the channels. I decided to just avoid the area and rode back toward the campsite over the lower mountain ridge. As I turned back, I noticed something off in the distance on the side of the mountain face. It looked like an abandoned silver mine or a natural cave of sorts. At this point, my curiosity got the better of me, and I shook off any fear I may have had. Now I could actually do a bit of exploration. I rode up to the side, dismounted, grabbed my night vision monocular and rifle, and peered inside. I couldn't tell how deep it was, but it seemed more man-made than natural. The rocks looked roughly carved, but I'm not a geologist, so I couldn't say for sure. I couldn't smell or hear anything unusual, so I decided to venture further in. I put on my night vision and waited for my eyes to adjust from the bright desert sun to the darkness. After a moment, my eyes adapted, and I turned on my monocular.